Let's then move to Anil. Anil, from the private sector perspective, how would you present your experience and the role you play within this large topic?
Thank you very much, Kar. I'm under huge pressure with Nadine exactly finishing at 10 minutes. So I'll try to be around that. If you can just bring up the presentation, I quickly wanted to say that I'm a debit credit man. I'm a banker. Started my career with a government bank and then ended up to become an accidental entrepreneur in agriculture about 11 years ago when I started or I became the founder of Samunnati. Samunnati, the name means collective growth, collective prosperity, and collective elevation. So this word collective is an important dimension for us that we feel will add a lot of value to why we exist as an organization. So if we go to the next slide, we started our journey fairly with a simple proposition that you provide finance, you remove the working capital constraint, and the players in the value chain will start engaging with each other. But very soon we realized that while finance is important, it is not sufficient. You need to do a lot beyond finance because the requirements, the needs of the farmers keep evolving with every step of our intervention. And inspired by Maslow's hierarchy of needs, our native understanding, our on-field experience shows that you may start with access to finance while engaging with the smallholder farmer, but slowly you have to move up the ladder in terms of providing the items that are mentioned in the bold, customized finance to market linkages to better agricultural practices and all the way to how do you mitigate the risk of the agriculture as a sector. So the idea that germinated with solving the problem of the value chain in agriculture in India by providing working capital structures soon evolved into an ecosystem play, because the starting point of this idea is how do we make markets work for smallholder farmers, because all other places the markets have been working off the farmer. So changing the narrative of for from off requires a comprehensive engagement. So if you go to the next slide, what we started understanding is you need to understand the dimension of the supply side and demand side, because the players on both these sides have unique requirements and their legal composition itself could also be different from each other. But if you recognize the fact that there is a need to understand both the supply side and demand side, it requires an orchestrator, it requires an ecosystem player who not only looks at the requirements on both sides of the supply and demand, but facilitates the engagement between the supply side actors and the demand side actors. And that is what Samunnati has been aiming to do in the last 11 years. So what has remained constant is why we exist as an organization, whereas what we have been doing over a period has evolved, keeping in mind not only the evolving requirements of the farmers, but also the evolution of the agriculture landscape in India, especially with the technology dimension coming in. So from financing solutions to market facilitation, Samunnati aims to be the orchestrator of movement of goods and cash, movement of information across the value chain actors, and most importantly, provide an integrated approach to the value chain proposition. So if you go to the next slide, we have looked at solving for the dimension of access as one of the tools that will focus on access to finance, access to markets, access to the advisory services in terms of how do you do what we do in a better manner, and then access to innovation. So this provision of access would entail three things clearly for us. One, what is the legal structure that enables this to happen, because financial services is highly regulated space, and being engaged in a regulated space means you have to work within the boundaries of what is permitted and what is possible to be done. But when your engagement is beyond what is permitted and what is to be done from a larger purpose perspective, what are the other legal frameworks that are required is what led us to set up a foundation for advisory services, as well as set up a innovation lab to test out newer ideas so that we engage with the entire agri ecosystem in tandem. So what Samunnati today represents is a holistic dimension of what an agri value chain enabler should be doing, constantly deploying the solutions and learning from the deployment, and then bringing that back into product structuring and delivering to the players in the agri value chain. So if you go to the next slide, this journey of what we started as an idea in providing financial services has moved on scale a little significantly on the number side. Today, Samunnati works in about 28 states. As you know, India is a federal structure, and then 28 states is like the almost the entire subcontinent. So we cover almost the entire country, reaching out to about 3,500 agri-enterprises and about 30,000 farmer collectives called farmer producer organizations, which in turn have a membership base of anywhere between 8 to 10 million smallholder farmers. That's the scale in terms of the reach that we have brought in. But purely, since we are talking about a private sector player and what we are doing in this space, from a gross transaction value perspective, we also have grown, but grown responsibly, I would say. One, from a $20 million gross transaction value in 2017, all the way to close to $1 billion last financial year. And we are looking at in the next 5 years, how do we reach a $5.2 billion kind of a gross transaction value? But these are still numbers. These are still indication of what can happen. But from our perspective, a private sector player bringing a private capital to make markets work for smallholder farmers is also validation that agriculture and food systems, when engaged in a comprehensive manner, can unlock a lot of hidden potential in a viable and sustainable manner. Hence, we have put a lofty goal of reaching 1 every 4 farming families in the country by 2030, which means we having access to about 25 million smallholder farmer families, thereby enabling a resilient, inclusive food systems and food future. So that is what we are looking at. And if we go to the next slide, specific to the topic that that triggered this entire thought process, I must confess that as a banker, I had an understanding of how to do agri-finance. And as a value chain player, I also understood how to integrate agri-finance to the value chains. But thanks to the preparation for this session, I understood a lot about the food systems transformation and how the food system finance extends beyond transactions and beyond the generations. So thanks to all of you for giving me this opportunity, that I understood 3 critical things. One, the food systems are an integral part of our survival, I would say, and hence a $350 billion requirement annually can happen only when the public, private, and all partnerships come together to do it. But as rightly mentioned by Nadine and would be validated perhaps by other questions that would come, public finance cannot do this alone, and private finance players must come to bring innovation, accountability, and especially scale to this entire endeavor and effort. At Samunnati, we see 3 clear roles for private finance. One, how do we drive innovation? How do we invest in technologies that are solving for bigger problems? And how do we focus on regenerative agriculture? And most importantly, how do we bring in the dimension of traceability? So on the dimension of driving innovation, these are the 3 things that we see Samunnati to be focusing on. Second dimension, especially in the context of smallholder farmers that Samunnati would be focusing on, is how do we expand the inclusion? Can we co-invest with DFIs and governments to reach smallholder farmers, including women entrepreneurs? Because the role of women in agriculture is laudable and quite significant. Third one is most important one, which is how do we build accountability in this entire space? Can we use data to link finance with outcomes like nutrition, sustainability, and increase in the income security of smallholder farmer families? So This is how we are looking at how finance ecosystems can work together like enterprises, thereby reducing the risk for private financial players, but at the same time increase the value add. So that is where we are seeing private finance in sustainably investing and participating in this space. So this is where I would pause, and I look forward to further deliberations. And I think I have covered it within the time frame. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anil. Really great the way you frame it, and very nice to hear the collective element in the Samunnati's name already. Your ecosystem approach, finance connected with different services and parts of the ecosystem, and also the three roles you make explicit from the private sector angle, right? Innovation, inclusion, and accountability. And maybe last but not least, when an institution from India talks about large, then from any other country perspective, that is large indeed with capital letters. I mean, 28 states in India, that is large. That is scale already. So thank you for that. The very, very nice insights. And I think we're absolutely ready to move to the next phase of this discussion.